Time for some updates. It has been a fun ride making light boxes. When I saw Pete's first video about putting light boxes together, I said, oh my god, that's cool. I didn't realize, I never even thought I could combine, LEDs and printing and make these really cool things out of them. And I very quickly rushed out a couple of videos just like sharing, here's something that's really fun that I've enjoyed doing. And I think, let's see here, my first one, first box I put out was back in October. Okay, future Rev here. I'll be honest, that date didn't seem right to me, so I went and looked it up, and it turns out Longcat here was actually from almost exactly a year ago. So, yeah, this would have been when Maker World came around, not when I made my first light box. So I guess this is like an 8-month video, things I've learned in 8 months of making light boxes. And I've done a lot of cool ones since then. Started adding a lot more advanced things to them, like using WLED to put all sorts of fancy effects into them and things like that. So let's kind of go through a couple of things. First of all, I've been wanting to make a new tutorial video for quite a while, and I apologize that I haven't. Finding time for it has been a challenge, and finding something that's been easy enough to put a video together that makes sense has also been a challenge, because a lot of the ones I've taken on aren't really so very standard. What I want to do on this one, I want to put together a couple of short videos, well, short being relative. This one is going to cover what our artwork, getting it put into Fusion. And unlike the Generabox video, the more recent ones that I'd had, I want to work around, here's my artwork, now let's make a box around that, instead of let's make a rectangle and put artwork into it, which is what Generabox was all about. So for that, I finally had one that crossed over. A friend of mine, I play Helldivers with him all the time. His wife said, hey, his birthday's coming up, make him a light box. And I want you to go ahead and make it using the image that the game has for the difficulty level y'all play, because we always play Helldivers difficulty. So yeah, this was the nicest icon I could find. It's hard to find this image. And the problem with this is when I go and zoom in on it, well, this is what's called a raster image. JPEGs, PNGs, WebPs, whatever, they're raster images. They're built on pixels. So a grid of dots. Worked great for everything just about, except for our purpose. We need to have what's called a vector image. We need to have something that works with basically math instead of dots, because it needs to be scalable. So to that end, Vectorizer AI. There are a lot of different vectorization softwares out there. Some are free, some are paid. There's software you can run locally, like Inkscape. Inkscape is a wonderful application. I love it. Vectorizer gives you the fastest, cleanest results, bar none. Out of all the different settings, or all the different softwares that are out there, this simply works the best. In my opinion, and I think most of the community will back me up on it. I don't even use it all that often, maybe once or twice a week. That once or twice a week is enough to justify the, what, $10 a month or whatever it costs. If you're going to be doing a lot of these light boxes, absolutely check this out. I'll put a link in the description to use the affiliate link for our buddy Pete. Worth every penny. Even if you only use it twice a month and it saves you 2 hours a month, well, I value my time at more than $5 an hour, so I suggest this. I want to go over my settings that I use in it. I've got my icon here. Again, this is a small, low-quality icon, which is a problem because it's not going to have much to work with. But already we've got pretty decent results. We're going to do some cleaning up on this, and I'm going to do a lot of manual editing because I know I'm going to have to clean this up. If you have larger images, this will be easier. If you have more detailed images, this will be easier because you will get cleaner results. But hey, this works because now we can show off some of the efforts to actually cleaning this up. First and foremost, gradients. Gradients are terrible. In this case, where I have like the shadows for this image, it's going to try and blend between the white and the black and the gray. If there's anywhere between the red and the white, or if it sees like different colors of red, because again, this is a very low quality image, it's going to try and work with those in Vectorizer. So in this case, you can see where it has like a couple of the different colors right here for the shadow. It's trying to build that without having an infinite array of colors. So first things first, I want this to be as few colors as possible. All I need red, white, and black, I suppose. So this little icon up here, your palette image, bring that up, and I'm going to tell it not 2, not 3, maybe 4. 4 colors seems about right. We'll do 4 colors. If you have a more complex image, this will make your life so much easier. So instead of having multiple layers that it tries to cut down, you have fewer layers. Your printer, let's say you have a Bamboo X1P1 series, you've got 16 shades to work with, 16 colors to work with. You can use some more advanced techniques like using either layer blending or trying to work with different thicknesses for different lighting effects, all of which are very valid ways of doing this, but we're trying to go simple. So I'm just going to tell it to use 4 colors: black, white, red, and transparent. You always have the first one is transparent. So we do that again. Now we don't have all those grays in here. That should make this a little bit easier to work with. There's a couple of different recommended settings. Some people like to work with fill shapes. I don't. I'll explain why in a minute. I prefer to use stroke the edges between shapes once. Off of the default settings, I prefer to turn off the circular arcs and elliptical arcs. This is actually something that Pete has worked with the folks at Vectorizer specifically for the purpose of creating light boxes, and they said, hey, this will improve your experience. So my suggestions again, stroke the edges between shapes, turn off the 2 different arcs, and when you switch it from fill shapes over to stroke the edges, some of your other settings change, like you can no longer choose filling gaps. This is what I recommend. So I'm going to grab this and just overwrite one of the ones I was playing with earlier and jump into Fusion. In Fusion, I have a couple of recommendations for you. First of all, create a template file. This will make your life so much easier. This one's mine, my Lightbox source. I'm just going to make a copy of it real quick. I'm going to rename that copy because this is going to be the Helldivers box. Mark that as editable because I am not paying for Fusion. The free demo works fine for me. So in my template, I have all the things I work with on a regular basis, the different modules and things that I put into my boxes. This goes all the way back to my very first keyhole and my very first DC jack that I put in, and just everything I've used since then. The most common ones that I use, I'll turn off the ones I don't use, or the ones I'm not going to use on this one at least. I don't need any of those. Well, I will need the keyhole eventually, I suppose. Keyhole back on. I don't need that one, that one, that one, or that one. These are the 4 that I'm going to end up using on this box. I need a keyhole to hang it from. I've got my USB-C port, the little insert that I'm going to use. Then I'm going to put a D1 Mini and an AOD in this. The AOD is a PWM driver for non-controllable, non-addressable LEDs. Basically, for the box I'm building, these 2 parts are completely unnecessary, but I want this to be able to be controlled. This will give me the ability to basically, for an extra like $4, turn this box into something that is, you can put it on a timer, you can give it dimmable controls, remote control, all that kind of stuff. It costs like nothing. You add like 4 solder joints to it. It's absolutely worth doing. And we'll go through that in like part 3 of this video. So anyways, from here, a couple things to consider. First of all, working with that template file is great because I already have my bounding box. This is just my range for my printer. Let's go ahead and edit this real quick because I want to turn those into instruction lines. That's something I've forgotten to do. Sorry about that. So anyways, what can we do in Fusion? Well, there's a couple things. First of all, something I think a lot of people overlook is canvases. If you go to insert in canvas, or in my case, I've got it pinned up here, canvases are super cool. So I'm going to start a new sketch real quick, and I'm going to add a canvas. What the canvases let you do is you can take a raster image, oh, it's not going to go to the canvas, sorry about that. You can take that raster image, that JPEG, that PNG, that bitmap, that whatever, and literally just drop it in as a background. And you may be wondering, well, what's the purpose in that? What's the use in that? If nothing else, and now I have a visual reference of what I'm recreating. But you can also use this for tracing, to recreate things just by drawing lines on top of them. It's a really cool little technique. So I'm just going to drop this in here, and I'm not going to bother scaling it right now. I'm not really that worried about it, just kind of showing what it does. This is something that you don't really get to interact with. It's there, but you can't do anything with it. Where you insert it in your timeline matters. I created my sketch before I did this, so now it's not going to show up. If I move that canvas back one to where my sketch was created after this, now when I go in and edit my sketch, I can still see it. This is pretty cool because now I can like come in here and draw my circles to try and recreate components of it or whatever I may need to do. Very, very useful thing, especially if you're recreating logos or things like that, where you want to have that visual reference, maybe for tracing dimensions of things or whatever. However, that's not what we intend on doing in this one. So I'm going to turn my canvas off. We're going to insert an SVG. Same thing, I pin it. I don't remember if it's pinned by default or not. I'm in my sketch already, so I'm going to insert that SVG. And we'll grab this one. Couple of cool things you can do with this. First of all, I've got my bounding box turned on so I can see that 250 millimeter box on the outside. This represents basically the size of my printer plate. I also have another one at 235 millimeters, which is kind of like my safe zone. What I'm going to do is just kind of scale this out first. Let's bring it up. I don't know, right about there maybe. It's probably too big, but that's fine. I guarantee that's too big. Let's rotate this 45 degrees. Try and put that back in the middle. No, maybe it's not. I might have gotten that just right. So I've got my corners are inside of my safe zone. Actually, I scaled that perfectly. Cool. I don't know how I did that right the first time, but okay. So now that I know this is the size that I want to work with, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to square, level, or whatever you want to call it. Bring it across flat. We'll say flat. Fusion does not, in my experience, like working with things that are not XY level. I don't know what the word is. Still perfectly doable, but it's just easier when flat things are flat. I'll say it that way. I know those words are wrong, but I don't care. So in my sketch still, first thing I'm going to do is just turn off constraints because I don't want them on. I'm going to get rid of this outside. This is ugly. This is not what I want to work with, but I'm using this as a template, basically. I'm going to work from this to recreate this by hand so I can get some really nice crisp lines and then modify it past there. First things first, I had mentioned back over on our settings for Vectorizer why I'm using stroke the edges instead of fill shapes. One of the issues you will have if you use fill shapes. Let's say like this piece right here, I don't want it. Well, I can just double click this and get multiple lines all at once. If you're using fill shapes, that typically doesn't work. So that's one nice thing. The other part of it is duplicate lines. Something we've seen in the community quite a bit. If I were to have, and I'm going to exaggerate it here a lot, if I were to have a duplicate line like this, and usually it's like a fraction of a millimeter difference, but it would still be there. If you zoom like way, 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 way in, like as far as you can go, you would see that there's this tiny, tiny little microscopic gap. When you go to extrude your shapes and you have like this shape and this shape and this shape, that tiny little gap in the middle, while virtually invisible, can be enough in your slicer when you go to actually print this thing that it will put a little bitty distance between those elements. And where that matters, like let's say where the red of the eye and the white of the skull are, if it were to try and introduce that little tiny bit of a gap right along this edge, that could be just enough to where it has a weak bond, to where the white or the red of the eye and the red of the skull just don't bond together very well at this line right here, causing it to be weak and fall apart. I've seen that more times than I can count in different community posts and forum posts and whatnot, where people print their boxes and the faces fall apart. This is one of the reasons why. Another one being not using an assembly, but we're not going to have that issue. But yeah, again, this is part of why I like stroking the edge of shapes between, stroke of the edges between shapes once, because what that instructs it to do when it's creating this SVG, instead of saying that the eye is a shape and the skull is a shape and there needs to be a line for the skull and a line for the eye, and sometimes those lines don't perfectly line up, it tells it instead, just draw one line between the shapes. That's what this does. So for this one, I've got a lot of cleanup I need to do on this. So like all of that, I don't want that. This weird shape that it tried to draw because of the shading that was the image, I don't want that. I'm going to have a lot of cleanup on this, but that's okay. I'm just going to come through and double click a whole bunch of this to get rid of those shading elements that are unnecessary. I don't need that line. It's pretty much good enough there. What I'm going to do from here is start tracing out what I actually want this thing to look like. And because I am very retentive about these things, I'm going to move a point over to my middle. And just to make life easier, we'll put that down a little bit. I'm trying to find my center point. And of course, that is not lined up center. It should be, though. I think that should be. If I go back and look at my source art and zoom out, that looks like it should be a straight line. And it was just because this was blown way apart. It's like that point, that point, that point. Is that a straight line? I think it should be, and I think it's just thrown off because of the shading. So when I create it, that's how I'm going to do it. Don't be afraid to modify these things. So for example, I want these to line up a little bit better. I have no problem coming through here and taking what's been imported in my SVG and trying to line these things up. So I'm going to move all of this. And of course, I zoomed in and can't, there it is. Nope, not going to play nice at that distance. Let's zoom in a little bit further. And a little bit closer. Looks a little bit closer. Of course, I don't have a nice sharp point on this. We'll just move that. I want to make this a sharp point. I don't want this curve right here, so we'll delete that curve. Some of the cool tools you have to work with. Trim and extend. I use these extensively. The extend tool works by, well, extending things. Trim tool, shortcut being T, cuts off whatever it highlights red. So I've taken that round edge and now made it a sharp edge. Neat. I could do that all throughout this thing to try and put nice sharp edges all over it, but I'm not going to put that kind of time into it. If I come back in here and take my middle part, move you, I want to point to position, grab my point, and move you over to 125. 125, not 12. There we go. So I've got one point in the middle. I've got another point in the middle. Looks like that's kind of lined my skull up. Cool. Looks like this is starting to line up a little bit better. Kind of cleaning that shape up. I'm not going to make you watch me do all of this because, again, this is just me wanting to create a very precise recreation of the original artwork. But basically, I'm going to go through here and sharpen the rounded corners and make sure that everything is nice and neat and even. And basically, because this is an image that is mirrored, I'm going to focus on doing the left half of it, and then I'm just going to mirror it over to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here, and if I come across anything really exciting along the way, I'll unpause it, but basically it's just cleaning up the shape data. Okay, so at this point, I've got the image I want to work with. Basically what I did in here, I went through and created all of the geometry on one side over here on the left, and then just created a mirror of it. Did that by drawing a center line. That's part of why I lined everything up at that 125 millimeter mark, and then telling it to mirror over. I had to connect a few extra things and whatnot, but I'm pretty happy with this. And if I turn on my canvas, that's pretty darn close. I'm happy with that. Is it going to be absolutely perfect? Probably not, but again, I'm happy with it. Except for this. I need to fix this. I think that should come in. So let's edit that. How do I want to fix that? Turn this off. So one of the cool little things you can use is the line type. Construction lines are a lot of fun. Construction lines are these dotted lines. They don't actually interfere with your geometry. For example, this is still one piece here, whereas if I made that a regular line, which you can toggle just by tapping X, now I have two different pieces. Construction lines are super useful if you're just trying to connect the dots, basically. So yeah, I think what I want to do on that, I'm going to go ahead and do this on both sides real quick. Draw another line over here as a construction line. And I'm going to turn those to solids, or to normal lines. Then I'm going to bring up my trim tool, knock out the middle, knock out that piece. Does that look right? Let's see if that looks right. You know, I don't think that's right. I really wish I had a higher quality. Let's see if I can find a better image of this. Helldivers difficulty image. See, they're always these tiny little pictures. It's the best you can find. That's the same washed out image. That's even smaller. I think this is actually the one I was working with. Okay, so those should be flat across, and it looks like maybe those are flat. Okay, so those are just 90s then. Okay, we'll work with that. So basically undo what I had just done, and then bring this one down. I think that's what I need to do. So let's undo all of that. Okay, and that looks long, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to just cut these off right here like that. And trim tool, knock that out. Hit X to make that solid. Trim tool, get rid of that and that. Select that one, X to make it solid. I think that's about as accurate as that's going to get. Why are you saying you're not connected? Are you over or something? These little white dots are usually unnerving. There's something about that. I'm not going to worry about it. All right, zoom back out. I think that's close enough. Not perfect, but probably fine. I'm okay with that. So the trick from here, now that, let's say that you have a clean SVG you're going to work with already, you don't have to do that cleanup work. What do you do to actually make this into something that you can print, to make this into a functional light box? And this is where offsets come in. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to draw some lines. I'm first of all going to name this artwork, just so I can keep track of my sketches. I'm going to edit my sketch, hit L for line, and I'm going to connect things. Basically, I want to fill in these voids in the middle. I want to make everything on the inside of this. Not quite. And if I'm watching this, if I touch this line down here, you see how I have those two little green parallel symbols that show up? If I come back over here, it'll snap to that parallel for me. And then when I drag it to where I get that little X to show I'm intersecting the line and I'm still parallel, I'm basically extending that line. So instead of using the extension tool, I just have another line that's parallel. It's actually one of your constraints up here to make this line stretch out. I just want to try and keep that geometry clean. I think what I'm going to do in the interest of art for this part up here, I'm going to use my inspect tool to find out how far this is. 2.807. That's unfortunate. I wish that was an more even number, but we can work with it. I'm going to extend this line all the way over. Why did that not connect? I might have clicked on something I shouldn't have. Maybe I just need to extend it. Okay, and we'll trim off the extra. All right. What probably happened is I clicked on what would be this line right here instead of actually intersecting that one. So just extending it and trimming the extra off forced it through. But then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab all of these little pieces. I could double click actually, you know what? I'm going to double click everything. It's easier. Double click. Come on. Double click. Why am I bringing up move? Okay, we'll just get all of it. I'm going to offset that. Couldn't offset, of course. That's fine, whatever. You and you. You let me select. Nope. 2.087 was it? Or 2.807? No, I forgot my distance. I have this one over here already. It's a line, this little construction line. So I'm going to put that up there just so I can see it. And to make sure that doesn't influence anything, I'm going to toggle that as a driven number. Driven numbers, the ones that show up in gray, are basically just measurements. I can change this, and this number does not enforce the distance. If I have that as a driving number, I can change that, and it will change the distance between these. But a driven is basically just giving me that number. 2.807. Okay. O for offset. Also, this button up here. This is basically what light boxes are. It's just offset numbers. 2.807. You can do that elsewhere, but not here. I'm going to offset. Now here's another one. You see how it's selecting the majority of that shape? I don't want it to do that. I'm going to turn off chain selection. Now I can choose just one number, 2.807, or one line. Make that a negative to bring it out. Offset again, U 2.807. And good. Trim tool time. Knock out that one, and that one, and that one. And that one, and that one, and that one. I need to join these together because they are not joined together. You can see a lot of times people say, well, hey, why can't I select this shape here? What's wrong with it? Well, it's not a continuous line. In fact, oh, this is why I couldn't do my offsets earlier. This was done poorly by me. So I'm going to trim that and that. Now that's a continuous line. Now I can actually do this. I'm going to go back and fix this first real quick. I'm going to undo all of this. Right there. So I should have caught this earlier. This is an example of me doing this poorly. These lines do not work. It's not a continuous line from one to the other. There's an intersection there. So if I delete that part and delete that part, and if I would have done this before I did my mirror, it would be on both sides. Delete that part and that part. Now, I should be able to select the whole thing. Nope. There's an issue here as well. And I'm zooming in so far, like all the way in. There might be something screwy here. To fix that, an easy little way, I'm going to draw a circle. Just a tiny little circle right here. Oh, my computer's getting mad. And delete those parts in the middle of it. And delete my circle. Because I don't need it anymore. And then I'm just going to connect these two together. Now let's see what happens. There's probably more. There's probably another one down here at the bottom that I need to do that too. Nope, I get a continuous line. Sweet. Okay. So now I can just double click. Why is it moving? Because I'm dragging, sorry. Select the whole thing. Now I can do an offset. Minus 2.807. That's what I wanted to go for. And what about this one? Yep, this one's going to have the same thing. This is a result of me having mirrored it. Usually not something you'll run into. But resolving those little arc issues or whatever you might have where these lines don't perfectly match up. It's enough to be continuous for a shape, but not enough for a continuous line. Again, just draw a little circle. And I want to say this was a Pete suggestion, so kudos to Pete again for that. Oh, you're not letting me cut it up, huh? My circle needs to be bigger, probably. Or can I extend it? Nope. I'm not going to mess with that, to be honest. I'm not that worried about it. Start getting some weird things if you mess with it. Anyways, I've got this line coming around, so what I want to do is make this one continuous shape. I'm going to trim out that and this one piece right here. Then come over here and do the same. Clean out the inside and then the extra. Now I have all this junk on the bottom. I can double click it and delete it. I don't need it. So I've got this little filler now. Great. The reason why I care about that, I want to try and replicate this line across here. This is just going to be black filler. I need to do more offsets. So I'm going to hit over offset, re-enable chain selection, pick you, and now we need to start thinking about how we really want to make this box. I do my offsets in a particular way. I like to do the face of my light box as the insert and then have my walls attached to the base of my light box. To do that, I'm going to need a couple of different offsets. And the math I use for that, because I type math in here instead, is going to be multiples of wall widths. And I'm thinking about the width of the lines that my printer is going to make. In this case, I've done some playing around. 0.38 millimeters is what a standard 0.42 millimeter line actually prints at. And I want to do 5 of those. So that's going to be my first offset, 1.9 millimeters. I'm going to do it again, 0.38, but this time times 10. So what I've got here is my actual artwork, an inner wall and an outer wall. And look at how big and rounded that has become, or how long and pointy that has become. We're going to shorten that up in a little bit. I need to repeat this process on the other side. Offset U, 0.38 times 5. Now it's on the wrong side, so I'm just going to hit the home button and put a negative sign in front of there. Now it's going the right direction. Offset again, U, 0.38 times 10. Again, need to make it negative. And yes, I could type in negative 3.8. I just, out of habit, do the math. Now, we can keep these super sharp points. And for this part of it, it would actually fit. But I'm not going to gain anything out of this. Because when I go to extrude this, this is going to be, what, white or red or whatever color? White. And then I'm just going to have black and black. So these really don't need to be terribly huge. And we can shorten that up using our fillet tool. First, I'm just going to extend this out, connect these together, make sure I get continuous lines. because when I come to extrude these, I'm going to need to be able to select this part and this part. Got a little bit more cleanup to do. Down here, I've got some overlap on these areas. Let's see here. How do I want to clean this up? So let's try to keep this part continuous. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to offset from these. So this one, offset 0.38 times 5. And then do it again. Offset this one, 0.38 times 10. Got all these extra lines everywhere, but that's what the trim tool's for. All I have to do is think about what line am I working on. So I'm going to hit T for my trim tool. I'm going to cut out this part and this part, because that's the line I want there. For this one, I'm going to trim out this part and that little nubbin and this part and this part and this one and this one. Now I've got that line. On the inside of this, that doesn't matter. I'm just going to clean that up to the original. I need to clean up on the outside, that one and that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, and a little bitty bit right there and right there. So if these were connected, I would have my outer wall, my inner wall, and then this is all just artwork filler. I'm going to delete all my extra lines. This is where double clicking comes in so handy. I can get rid of that. Which one of these is my original? I think that is my offset line because it's broken. It's not extended all the way out. We'll get rid of it. I don't need that line. I don't need that line. So now I have my artwork, my original right here and here. This is the filler just to kind of fill in that gap, which we won't even need. Do I need that? Yeah, I will need that. And we'll go ahead and I'll need to extend that. Yeah, I can extend that, and then I can delete this. I can trim that out. Trim there, and trim there. Oh, come on, dimension line out of the way. What are you? This is just me being curious. What are you? Part of the arcs, maybe? I don't know what you are. Anyways. Your offsets do have to be continuous lines. That's probably why it's angry. 0.38 times 5. Offset 0.38 times 10. I'm just going to repeat this process, the same thing I did on the crown. I'm going to take the shapes that I care about, offset them by those two metrics, 0.38 times 5 and 0.38 times 10. I'm just going to repeat this for all of my outside shapes and connect them together. So I'm going to go ahead and pause again. Okay, so what I've done at this point, I just went through, did some extensions and trimming the same way I had been. I now have an outer band, an inner band, and then all the different artwork components. What I need to do at this point, because I'm happy with the way all that looks, I want to round these corners off because I don't need this to be so long coming out here. Now, would that work? It absolutely would. And there's no reason you have to do this, but I'm perfectly content rounding these off a little bit. To do that, I don't want to change this one. This is my artwork. And because I did all of my offsets the same distance, in this case, the 0.38 times 5 and 0.38 times 10, which gives me the 1.9 and 3.8 millimeter offsets, I'm going to bring up my fillet tool, which is just a rounding tool. I'm going to grab the first one. So this is my artwork, and then this is my first one. I'll select those two walls, and at first it's going to just come up with whatever number. Now, I'm going to put in my 1.9. Why am I doing that? Well, this is what I call a concentric radii. I think that's the proper term for it. That from this point, if I were to draw, in fact, let me cancel this. If I were to create an arc and do a center point arc, from here, somewhere in here, I would find that 90 degrees, which is that 1.9, and then draw an arc over. If I were to do this, I'm creating this in such a way that when my printer is drawing these lines, it prints one line up here, and then it creates that corner and comes back down. When it comes back to do that second wall, it's going to come down and be able to just arc over and come back down. I want to keep this the same so that when it's on the outside, it's five line widths over. Easiest way for me to do that is to use the fillet tool, take the center one, and tell it 1.9, because that's the distance of my offset. Do that. Now I'm going to bring that back up and do this on the other ones as well. Little trick, if you just type in the number and don't hit enter, but just come over and grab your next one, you can round it off just the same. So I can come through here and do all 5 of these and not have to type it over and over and over again. So that's the inside of it done. Well, now I need to do the outside of it. So I'm going to bring up my fillet tool again, grab these 2 points, 3.8. 3.8. Then do the same thing. This one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Now that rounds off the outside of this. Now this is not the part that's going to light up. When I have this lit up, this is going to be the part that actually glows. This is just the supporting walls that holds it all together. I don't care about trying to make the black parts, just the black plastic, big and sharp. This is going to save print time. This is going to make it easier to get lighting into here, because if I had those really long spikes, I wouldn't very easily be able to run my lighting through it. This is just going to make my life a lot easier. So with that, I think that's pretty much my sketch complete. Part of what I wanted to double check, remember I had first scaled this to where this point to this point would fit inside my safe zone. Well, let me go in here and edit this real quick. I select, oh. So one thing that happens to me all the time, the select tool. By default, you have the window tool, which is 1. Draw your boxes to select things. You can also hit 2 to bring up the lasso tool, which can be useful in a number of cases. I think I used that earlier. I have a bad habit of hitting numbers when I don't mean to and accidentally bringing this tool up when it's not the one I want. Hitting 1 takes me back to using the rectangle tool. I hit M to bring up move, and I'm going to choose this set pivot point. And I'm going to pick just like the middle of the nose here, like that point. Confirm it, click the little checkbox, and now I can rotate this entire thing on that axis. Why I want to do this, if I rotate this 45 degrees and then move it, does it still fit on my printer? Yes, it does. Looks like I've got about, what, 5 millimeters, 10 millimeters on each side to spare. So it's not absolutely as big as I can print it, but it's pretty darn close, and I'm okay with that. So I'm going to cancel that move. So at this point, we've got our artwork completed, and I don't need my bounding box. I'm going to start doing my extrusions. I lost my name again because I changed it when I was editing it. Art. There we go. If you change the name while you're editing the sketch, it loses that. Or I undid something at some point and it lost it. Anyways, for our extrusions, I'm going to start by grabbing my outside wall. This piece. Hit E to bring up extrusion. And I'm going to say that I want this one to start as an offset 40 millimeters high. And I'm going to bring this one down by 2. Oops, sorry, down by 2. I work from top down. You can do this however you want. This is just how I've always done it. It's my method. A lot of people do this on different planes, like doing this on the YZ plane or whatever. This is just how I do it. Basically what I'm doing is starting with where the top of my box is at 40 millimeters high, and then I'm going to work down. So I want my outer lip to be 2 millimeters thick. Cool. Turn my sketch back on. I'm going to next grab the piece inside of there. Now this one I'm going to extrude, and this time I'm going to choose from object. Basically everything I do is going to be from object for the remainder of this project. Only the very first extrusion is going to be done with a distance from the plane. With that, I now have to choose my object. I'm going to choose the face on the very top here. I'm going to do this over and over and over again. This I want to extrude 5 millimeters down. It's going to be a join operation, and what this is going to give me is an outer and inner lip. This is what I'm going to be working with for my box. Join that together. This is all black so far. So if I look at it from the top down, I've got my 2 outer walls. None of this is artwork. This is just box work, if you will. Oops, I forgot to clean this up. I don't need that or that. There we go. So now I'm going to grab the remainder of what would be black. This piece in the middle and this piece right here. I'm going to extrude those from object, select this guy, negative 0.6. I don't need this thick. 3 layers is enough to block light when you're working with an opaque black. Sometimes it needs to be more if you're working with a less opaque black. There are such filaments on the market. I've never had a problem with 0.6. The remainder of my face is going to be 0.6. But this is all going to be black material. So there's that part. If I turn my sketch back on, now I've got my white and my red. That's all I need to do. So at this point, it's probably a good time to go ahead. No, I can start making components out of things. So I'm going to take my body here, and I could have done this in the very beginning. I could have, with my very first extrusion, I think I can't change it. No, I can't change it. Yeah, when you're doing an extrusion, you have the option, oops, wrong button. You have an option to create a new component instead of a body, and I should have done that on my very first one. I didn't, so I'll correct that now by turning this body into a component. Create component from bodies. It's now down here as a component. I'm going to change this to be called face, because that's what this is. This is my face. And inside of here, I've got body 1. This is lip black, because it's the lip of my print, and it's black. And now I'm going to create a component from that. I'm going to put a component in a component. The reason being is when I export this, I will have my face file. I'm going to use this as a step. And then I'm going to have inside of that where I'll have an object listed that's visible to Studio called lip black. It'll make it super easy for me to go, oh, that needs to be black. So moving on, let's grab our white components, which would be all of these things right here, here, and here. Those should be all my white things. I'm going to extrude those. Same as before. I'm going to come down and say from object, that object, and I'm just going to leave these as bodies. That's actually fine. Leave these new bodies. Negative 0.6. It still says new body. It didn't switch to join, which is good. And why are you not letting me do that? What did I mess up on? Oh, I did that as an offset instead of an actual extrusion distance. My bad. Negative 0.6. Now it says join, new body. And I'm doing these as bodies because I already have my component. So we'll create those. Now I have all these extra bodies right here. All these different things that I just extruded. A little trick, but you can do, not that it's necessarily terribly viable at this point. You can select multiple things over here just holding shift. You can click on one of them and name it like face white if you want, and since I have them all selected, it will rename all of them. You can also use the F2 button on your keyboard to do the same thing. What I'm going to do though is drag all of these down here to my face object. It will put them into a bodies folder. I'm going to take face white, create a component from that, and then grab all these other ones and drag them back into face white as well. We just have left face red. Oops, wrong button. Which is that part, that part, that part, and that part. So we'll extrude those From object, again, I'm selecting my face, that face lip that I made, because that's kind of like my master. I'm going to tell it my distance is -0.6, as with all the others, and new bodies. Same process as before. Face red. Drag these down to my face. Create component, and then put all of my reds with my reds. Now, here's part of what makes this cool. If I turn off my sketches, I've already got my library of colors loaded. I hit A to bring up appearance. So I've got all, well, not all, but most of my plastics in here. For lip black, I can literally just grab my black, drag it over to that piece, and now those are black. For my white, I want to find that one, white, and my red, red. And that's that. I now have a colorized version of my object. If I turn off my component, looks like I colored everything correctly. I'm happy with that. So we'll turn the canvas back off. This is my face component. That's it. It's done. There's not anything else I need to do to it. Now I'm going to make the base. I'm going to turn my artwork back on. Oops. Turn sketches back on altogether. I need to start with this piece. Okay, so I'm going to grab this outside part here, and what I want to do is project it off of this, or not project, I'm sorry, extrude it off of this. So I'm going to hit E for extrude again, and from object, I'm going to select that plane right there, that face, the underside of this, and I'm going to bring this down. I've already brought my face down by 2. I want to bring this down by a total of 5, so this needs to come down by 3, -3. Basically, this completes that face, but this is going to be new component, as I want this to be separate. Yeah, so that's there now. Let me pull this up. This is going to be base. This is the base of my face, or the base of my box. And I'll do the other extrusions, then convert these over to subcomponents. From here, I need to do this a few more times. I like putting in a decorative bias strip. Again, this is just the process I follow. If you want to skip this step, you are more than welcome to, and you would have extruded this one all the way down to the bottom. But what I'm going to do is do another one from here, -10 as new body. Okie dokie. Then, oh well, it didn't put it in the component, but whatever, it's fine. Then I'm going to extrude this one all the way up to there as new body. So now I have this part, and this part. I'm going to turn my face off because I don't need to see that. And I'm going to turn all of my bodies off. Oops. Turn my base off too. Grab everything, and I'm going to extrude this up by 0.28 because I'm going to print my base at a 0.28 millimeter height times 8. 8 sounds like a good number to me. Turn my bodies back on. I want this to join, not cut, so I will join it and click OK. So now what I have 3 bodies, and I'm going to go ahead and drag these down into my base. Turn that back on. There we go. I don't know why it didn't display them, but whatever. So I've got my base lip. I've got my base accent. And I've got my base black. Because, well, it's black. Those need to become subcomponents, so they are named, so just convert them to components. And now I can name them, or color them. You can do this by dragging directly to the objects if you want. Just make sure you don't drag to your sketches, because that messes with everything. That's what this is. Don't do that. So I'm going to go back to here, and my glow in the dark. And this is just, again, the way I've liked to build these forever, because, well, it is. So now I have my face and my base. On the face of my plates, or the face of my boxes, I like to add a quick chamfer to them. So we'll bring that up. And are you going to make me click every line? You are. Sometimes it'll select everything. It'll select multiple lines for you, but not in this case. I'm going to have to do them all individually. In my view settings, I have click through turned on to where you can click on things you can't see. Sometimes that's useful, sometimes it's not. In this case, it's not being terribly useful, but whatever. Clicky, 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 clicky. That should be... Oh, no. There we go. That should be my entire perimeter. I knocked that down by 1. Yay! That little 1mm chamfer, I just like the way that cleans this up a little bit for me. I think it makes a difference. So that's what I've got so far. Look at it as a render. Looks pretty clean to me. I think that's a pretty accurate representation of the Helldiver's difficulty icon. So, a few more things to do from here. Right now, this is just an empty box, and for a lot of folks, this is pretty much where the design process ends. They'll print this, glue it together, and drill a hole in the side of it and stick some electronics in it, like stick their strip in the side of it or whatever, and they're happy with that. Not me. So I need to... Let's look at this. In my artwork, I want to create a new sketch. I'll turn my components off because I don't need them. I don't really need to project anything here because I can see everything I need. I'm going to grab... You're not going to let me grab it because I'm doing the wrong thing. I was thinking about doing projections, but I really don't need to do any projections for this. Projections are super, super cool things. I'll just bring it up real quick. If you hit P for projection, you can bring up either other sketches or edges, faces, whatever, on different objects. It's a really super cool way to project the geometry of something into a new sketch so you can work on it from there. In this case, like I've taken those 2 lines, and if I turn off my artwork, I still have those 2 lines to work with. It's dynamic, it updates with things. It's a really, really cool thing, but I really don't need it for this one. So I'm just going to undo that sketch. I don't need it. Get rid of, I'm going to do this until I get rid of sketch 20. There we go. Okay. Let's turn my components back off. I want to be able to see this because I want to move these. This guy, I'm going to move you point to position. I'm going to choose that point. I'm going to move it to X 125 and Y like 140. Nah, 160. Yeah. That's going to be a keyhole that I punch through to hang this on, and I think that's a good place for it. Now I need to deal with these 2 guys. This is going to be where I mount my D1 Mini and where I mount my AOD, which is my PWM controller. I want to, first of all, where do I want to put them? I'm just going to hit move, and I'm going to drag them just up. Am I going to worry about absolutely dead centering these? Probably not. I think I'm just going to kind of get them where there's room and drop them there. Because I could put them off to one side, which might be advantageous. But turn them sideways. No. This is fairly small volume light. I think it's fine if I just kind of line them up a little bit like, there, whatever, good enough. One of the jokes I use, I'm not building rockets for NASA. Close enough is good enough. The last one, my USB-C plug, it's going to have to go off on one side. That's a bummer, because that always makes things hang kind of funny. I'll use a 90-degree cord on this. Anyways, this one, I'm going to want to turn my base back on. And I'm going to grab this. And I know just because I drew this line that it is at a 45-degree angle. Or 135, however you want to look at it. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to hit M for move. And I'm going to set my pivot to one of these center points. And confirm it. And we're going to move you 45 degrees this way. Okie dokie. Now I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to point to point. Select this bottom one, and put you in the middle there. I think that'll be fine. Now, I've specifically made this little sketch to be able to do that, where I can take this point and snap it to bottom geometry and everything lines up. Again, this is part of why I suggest using these template files. Otherwise, if you aren't doing that, you'd have to come through and create your own sketch that has all of the right dimensions in it for the holes that you're going to punch through and things like that. I think that satisfies where I need to put things. So I'm going to come through and do a couple of others. I'm going to extrude this and pull it all the way through. That's my keyhole. That will let me hang this on a nail or a thumbtack. I need to bring up these little holes right here. So I'm going to come in on these and grab you, and you, and you, and you, and you. And I'm going to extrude and say from... Do I want to do this here? Yes, I want to do this here. From object, and select this face and bring that up. See, here we got 2.8. Let's bring that up 3 millimeters. Let that be a join operation. Are those floating? Are they joining? No, they're joining. Good. Okay. Completely unnecessary and probably doesn't help at all. But what I'll do is I'll come in and do another fillet on these. I always want to say fillet, but I get in trouble when I say fillet. I'm going to select these parts of it, and we'll do that. Oh, I should have measured first. I need to measure. From this face to this face, I've got 3 millimeters exactly. Of course, because I just extruded 3 millimeters. So, fillet, you, and you. By 3. Except I want to make that a little bit steeper. Yeah, that'll be fine. Again, the fillet probably doesn't help any at all from a strength perspective, but it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling, so I do it. And now I need to come down here. I need to cut this one all the way through. I have learned from experience with my USB-C snap ends that they don't like the walls to be thicker than 1.5 millimeters. That's what this part is for. I'm going to extrude you again. I'm going to do you, let's see here, offset 1.5 millimeters, and then just pull it forward. What that's going to do is cut out any part of that that's a little bit extra, leaving me with a wall that is from here to here, 1.5 millimeters thick. So that way the little arms that actually snap in will grab properly without like getting misfigured. And then just because I can, I'm going to grab that line right there, which is, you kind of lose it here. You can't really see it that well. And it's probably going to be, well, let's measure the distance. In fact, you know what? I want to see that line. Here's another nifty little trick. I'm going to bring up inspection and go to section analysis. Choose that plane and drag it over to 125 just so it's right in the middle. And now I can see in the middle of my print. That's a fun little trick. Because what I want to do from here, I want to chamfer this that distance. So inspect from that plane to that plane is 0.4. Chamfer, that line, 0.4. There. So now that just isn't an overhang. I don't like overhangs. So that's done. What else do we need to do? Let me turn my analysis off. A nifty little trick you can use that I didn't on this one because it's symmetrical. If you want to find your center of mass, turn on all of your plastic, everything you're going to be extruding. Highlight all of it. So in this case, my two components. And then inspect and bring up center of mass. Tell it okay. What that's going to give you in your analysis now, you have a marker for center of mass. If I turn off my components so I can see it, I've got this one little mark right here. And if I highlight it, which it's not letting me highlight it for a reason, why can't I highlight it? There we go. Nope. Okay, well, click it there. By clicking over here, I can see it's at 125 and a tiny bit off and 135 and a little bit off. If I look at it from the top, this is by weight the dead center of my print. Now it's off a tiny bit because I've added these components to it and I've cut that hole in it. But 125 is basically where it needs to be because, again, I centered this around 125. If this was a weird or oblong shape or bigger on one end or whatever, you can use this to figure out what vertical line you need to put your hole in so that it will hang properly off of whatever thing you want to hang it off of. Again, I don't need it on this one because I know I've made a symmetrical model, but if you are making an asymmetric model, center of mass tool is super cool. Don't need that anymore. Let's see here. So I've got my face, I've got my base. I need to put my reflective layer in. So part of what I did earlier, I went through and did all these extrusions first. This is going to be where my D1 Mini mounts. This is going to be where my PWM driver mounts. I've got my keyhole. I've got my USB plug over here. I want this face to be reflective, because that will help bounce light around and prevent a dead zone in the middle. For one that's this shape, it's not really necessary for your big round or big rectangular boxes. It's much more useful. But the easiest way to do that, remember, I'm going to print my base, this entire thing, at 0.28 millimeters. So I'm going to select that face, hit extrude, minus 0.28 times 2. I want to take away 2 layer heights from that face. I'm going to cut that out. And you can kind of see that if I zoom way in here, that now I have like this little lip around things. That's exactly what I want. Reason being, I'm going to print that face in silk silver, and I don't want to have other plastic joining on top of that silk. Silk is known for having weak layer adhesion. So I put in my extra elevated bits, cut away the extra, and now I'm going to re-extrude it 0.28 times 2 as new body this time. Drag that down into my base. I'm going to name that base reflector. I'm going to create that to a component. Now what I have here, if I turn that base itself off, which is base black, now I have just that 2-layer thick little line, or little layer. And that will give me an addressable component in the slicer to say this is a different material and it will print with different properties. Also, it gives me the option to come in here and make that a light source for my renders. So now if I were to come in here and try and render this, that's going to be a bright glowing light, which will work great to actually see how this looks with light projecting through my face. So it serves multiple purposes. Not only is it more useful in the slicing engine, it's more useful when it comes down to actually creating your renders and such. So no reason to let this sit here and churn through the cycles. But at this point, that's basically it. There's a few things I want to clean up just for my own sanity, for my own quality of life. I'm going to come in here and turn off the face in my base. Let's get back to design. Where I have these internal angles like this. And you know, I probably should have done this before I did the reflector layer. Yeah, I probably should have. What I like to do is round these off using the fillet tool. Yeah, I need to do this before I do the reflective layer. So body component, extrude. This is where I cut it. That's where I extrude it. So I'm going to roll back to here. And this is another little Fusion thing. Use your timeline. If you make mistakes, if you want to change things, either scroll back or just edit them. So like where I did the chamfer right here on this component, right? If I wanted to change that angle or not do that or whatever, I can edit that and change how I did that. Like I want to do that as a 0.2 instead of a 0.4. I can change that. Or I can just suppress it altogether without deleting it from here. It's still available to me. I can just make it as though it didn't happen. Super, super powerful. So like in this case, I screwed up. I wanted to round these corners off before I dropped and rebuilt my my inside piece here for my reflector layer. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do that by scrolling back in my timeline, and now I'm going to do some fillets. I'm just going to do the inside angles primarily. Well, here's the thing. By doing this, I'm going to make this no longer... It's not going to print as nice. Maybe I don't want to. And I'll show you what I mean real quick. If I do... Let's just grab a couple of these angles on one side. I'll grab those and... those. Actually, and those two. Let's do that by like 2. No, 2's a lot. Let's do it by 1. Just to round those off so they're not sharp, hard edges. That's going to need to be different for these two if I was going to do this. 2 on those, and then we'll add this one and this one with 1. The idea on that is when I go to stick my LED strips on here, having these rounded edges will make that easier because I won't be able to stuff them all the way into this hard, sharp corner. The rounded edge will work better there. Same on the inverse, that when I go to wrap it around this hard corner by having that nice and round here, that will be easier to work with. But I just created a problem. Let me export this. Helldivers, step... And if I open this up in Studio, I'll show you where this becomes a problem. It's only a problem if you don't do it on both sides, but I don't want to change the outside geometry of this print. So let's rotate this so it fits. I'm going to have to rotate it the other way because of the no-no zone. Okay, so... now we've got this here. I'm just going to slice it. We'll don't really care about colorization or anything. If I look at it from here and I zoom in, when I round it off here, it's going to be okay with that. This is a minor enough change on these corners that it's not going to freak out. In fact, I think it actually improved it right here. Let's compare the other side. No, didn't really make a change there. It's a small enough change that it can adjust for this. So I'm okay leaving that in. You see where that got a little bit thicker right here? If that got any more thickness to it, it might become a second line that it has to draw in there. But then for over here, I made this a great big solid corner. So it's going to have to put a whole bunch of extra material into that spot. I don't really want that. Part of why I don't want that is the travel time. If I turn my travel lines on, look at all the extra travel. Sorry. look at all the extra travel that this is generating to bounce back and forth to be able to fill this in after it does its walls as compared to over here. Zoom that out a little bit. You've got all this extra travel being generated here. If you compare that up here too, this is okay. It actually didn't generate any extra travel here. There's a little bit in there. Okay. Might actually be cleaner this way because I don't have that internal void. So it's worth doing on, we'll call the, what are these? The acute angles, the inside angles. Looks like it worked out pretty decently over here too. But then on those really acute angles like this one, it's adding that internal space. It's going to add a lot of travel time. We've got 18 minutes, 16 seconds worth of travel on this. If I come back and suppress my fillet, suppress my fillet, let me re-export this. Replace it, yes. So again, 18 minutes, 16 seconds worth of travel. And let me reload that. Now we have the sharp corners all along. This is without our fillets. Slice it again. So only 1 minute difference. And I think that's because we don't have all the extra travel time here, but we added travel time elsewhere. Yeah, by not having these rounded off, it looks like we added a little bit here. Yeah, so it's worth rounding these off. It's not worth rounding this one off. I wouldn't do that one. Okay, so this is one of the things I like to do. I like to come in and frequently open this up in the slicer to see what it's going to look like. If there's something I need to change, like in this case, the fillet that I want to turn back on, I'm going to edit that. As far as the ones that include the fillet, I'm not, as much as I want to do that one, I'm not going to do that one. Because that was just, or maybe, you know what, maybe if I add that one as like, just a little bit. No, there's no reason to do that. But then these being 1 millimeter, let's include them. These being 2 millimeter, we'll include them. Was that 2 millimeter there? Yeah, that was 2 millimeter. And then you, and you is 2 millimeter. And I really want to add some to that. Let's throw the 1 millimeter on that. Just a little bit to make that easier to get the LED strips stuck on them. That's really all I care about, because when I put the lights in here, I'm going to put them right against the bottom of this translucent strip. And having that rounded off, this is actually going to save us time here. And I'm going to, do I want to do the whole thing? Actually, I really do. I really want to do the whole thing up on the top here, because making these contiguous, I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Making those contiguous is going to make those look a lot better, especially because that's going to be in a translucent, oops, wrong size. That's going to be in a translucent material. This green strip here is going to be a glow-in-the-dark. And that glow-in-the-dark really looks better when it's just printed straight through. So we'll select those as well. And maybe this works better if I do these on my multiples. 1.9 for you, and you 0.38 times 3. Oh, it's getting mad at me. Okay, so before it crashes, we'll go ahead and save. We'll export this again. Export, yes, replace, you, reload. From 18 something to 16 something to 17 something. We added some Added some travel somewhere. Where did we add some travel? Probably that little gap in the middle. Yeah, because if we actually look at the way this prints, you see, actually, it's a perfect example right there. It's going to have to draw these little inner bits first before it comes along to do the continuous lines all the way around it. And then it's going to have to break in the middle to go between those. It's not that bad. So aside from the inner points here and the outermost 2 points there, looks like maybe here. Yeah, there's a little bit there. That's not bad. That's really not that bad. And I'm using the wrong profile. Let's switch that to the base. Yeah, that looks fine. Kicking that up to the 0.28 layer height. Yeah, that's good. I'm happy with that. Cool. Still got a lot of travel going up to the face here because of that. Because it has that one little bit in there. I could round this tip off right here. And that'll make that print a lot cleaner. I'll do that. Got travel time to those and those. It's okay. Actually, there's no travel time there. Oh, because I didn't round that. Nah, it's fine. It's fine. Cool. Yeah, so now I can just advance my timeline back forward. I was kind of expecting to get an error there. Or, see, I don't have that silver all the way through. Sometimes this happens. I'm going to come back through and edit this and just click OK again. And now it updated that geometry, so now it has those rounded corners. Cool. Okay, so that's it. That's my base and that's my face. The only other things I could do on this, I don't want to put screws in this. I want to use some retention little bars for this. This is one of my favorite little things that I've started adding to a lot of these. Let's do one on each side here and then one on each side here. I think that'll push it together just fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new analysis or inspect. Where are you? Section analysis. And I'm going to use this one and pull it over to there. Should be fine. Turn that on. And I'm going to flip it for now so I can see this side. Here we go. I'm going to create a couple of sketches. First one is going to be this part right here. By creating a sketch, by clicking on that face, I now actually have the geometry of that face available in my sketch. So I'm going to bring up a line. I'm going to make it a construction line by clicking X. I'm going to find the middle, and I'm going to come down by 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters. Is that what I want to use? Yeah. No, I want to make that 1 millimeter. Sorry. Do I? No, 2. I want to make that 2. Sorry. I'm having to think about this. I haven't done this in a while. And I don't think I have the geometry of this one, do I? I do not. I'll have to project that. So I'll use project and click on that face. Click OK. Now I have that line to work with, so I can find the middle of it. Same thing, come down 2. That's just to find the middle points that I want to work with. I'm going to do a center rectangle. I turn off my construction line. I'm going to make this, yep, wrong one, 2 by 20. I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Create rectangle center, 2 by 20. And that's what I need in my sketch. From here, I'm going to take that in 1 millimeter on this side, turn my sketch back on, bring this one, same thing, in 1 millimeter. I'm going to bring up my chamfer tool and find that inner edge that it just created. Chamfer by 1. So basically I've just taken a little notch out of this. I'm now going to switch from my base to my face. And looking at this side, I'm going to grab both of those, extrude out by 1. So now I have these little pieces hanging off of them. Let me turn sketch off so that's a little bit easier to see. I'm going to hit my chamfer tool again. That face and that face by 1. I should get some nice little pyramid shapes. And then I'm going to fillet the edge of that by like 0.2. Just a little bit, 0.4? 0.4. Just enough to round it off. So that's still print friendly. I have no overhangs. It's a 45-degree angle right there. And what that will do for me, if I switch to the other analysis view and turn my base back on, where's my base? And we'll edit that view to bring it over to... There we go. So now I have this little connecting lip where when I go to push this down, it'll bend in and that will snap into place. And I've used this exact geometry so many times. It will bend and snap into place. So that will give me a nice solid connecting anchor to hold this box together. I'm going to repeat that. Let me flip my section view. I'm going to repeat that process somewhere over here, I think. Yeah, that should push it together nice and neat. So I'm going to turn my face off. I'm going to create a sketch on this one and do the same thing, where I'm going to find the middle of it and give me a 2 millimeter line down. Create my center rectangle, 2 by 20. Finish that one. Unfortunately, I've got this extra line right here. I don't know why exactly. There's something in my sketch. I didn't fix a line. That's okay. Create a sketch on here. To find that same center point, I'm going to project from there and there. I'm going to draw a construction line between the two of them. Then I'm going to draw another line on the midpoint. That one, because this midpoint is for this piece. This midpoint is for my line. There we go. And rectangle, center rectangle, 2 by 20. Okay, so now I have those two sketches. Same thing as before. Take out a 1 millimeter chunk here and a 1 millimeter chunk there. Chamfer those two so that there's no overhangs and I have a catch. And then I need to turn those two back on, switch over to my face, repeat the same process. Extrude 1 and extrude 1. Same as I did before. Chamfer U and U by 1. Flat your edges by 0.4. Cool. So now on my faceplate, I have anchors to hold this together on the front and the back. So I don't need adhesives. I don't need screws. I don't have to rely on friction fit. That will just snap in and hold it together. On my base, I have corresponding holes for those to clamp into. Awesome. That's it. I don't think there's anything else I need to do to this other than take some renders and do some exports. For the exports, a couple different things you can do. I have personally been a fan of doing save as mesh, doing a 3MF with high refinement for the face. Is that necessary? Well, yes and no. If I were to export this as a 3MF, all of my body names will show up. So face red and face white and all this, whatever my body names are, these should show up in there. That's part of the way 3MF works. It sees those. I know for a fact, because this is how I used to do it, if I had groups of bodies without using components, this is how 3MF works best. I've basically stopped using 3MF though for light boxes. It's not necessary. Step files just work better, in my opinion. So I will export by clicking on the face itself. Face Helldivers as a step file. This is like face v2. So I'll throw the v2 in there. I like putting the version numbers on the parts that come out of Fusion just so I can keep track of them. So face v2. And then I'll turn my base on, export it, base v2. And that should be it. I've got my face and my base as my step files. If I look to double check, if I create a new one here, let's just delete this. Nope, not design queue. Base, face. Looks like they import properly, and I can see the named components on my base, and I can see the colored components of my face. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to end video 1 right here, and video 2 will get into all the slicer settings and what they are and why they matter.